This story is dedicated to ANNWVYN Melona. Pwyll, head of ANNWVYN. Retold by Huw Carr. Long ago, in the island of the mighty, there lived a young ruler named Pwyll. He was lord of the 7 cantrefs, that is, 700 homesteads of Dyfed in what is now southwestern Wales. He loved his land and his people, and governed well. Yet what he loved best, maybe, was hunting. So one day he rode out from his court at Arbeth on his best horse with his favourite hounds and made for the forested valley of Glenkeich, where he let his hounds loose in the woods. In time he heard a great baying and smiled to himself, confident that his clever hounds had found the wildest stag for him to pursue. Following the sounds, he pressed through the twisting trees until he came to a clearing in a narrow pass. Yet he did not find his hounds there. No. Instead, he found another pack of hounds. But what hounds! They were so white that their sides shone with a light like the stars, and the red of their fine ears was so bright they turned the glade crimson all about them. Never before had he seen hounds so wondrous. They had brought down a beautiful stag. Overcoming his wonder, Pwyll went among them and turned them off the body of the stag. His own hounds were skulking back from the shining ones, so he called them to him and baited them upon the fallen body of the beast. Thereupon, a lone rider came into the clearing. He was dressed entirely in grey, from head to foot, and he rode upon a dapple-grey charger as beautiful as the shining hounds. Proud was its head, and strength was in every strike of its fine hooves. Then the rider spoke to Pwyll, and said with a deep voice that seemed to come from all around, "You have done me wrong, sir, and though I know your name, I will not now use it because of your discourtesy." Pwyll suspected at once what the stranger meant, but he still asked, "What discourtesy have I done you, noble sir?" "Never have I been so slighted as by your action today," replied the stranger gravely. "That a nobleman should drive my hounds from their prize, and give it instead to his own." "Between me and the gods of my tribe," Pwyll replied, "I'm ashamed that I have treated you so badly, lord. Tell me a way that I may make amends to you, and if it is in my power, I will not rest until I have done it." The stranger pulled down his riding mask and revealed his face. His skin was as white as the snow, and his brows were blacker than the raven's wing. His eyes were a striking blue, like a winter ice pool. Pwyll had never seen a more handsome face in mortal men. He began to suspect that this noble man was not so. Even as he thought this, the man said, "I am a Rowan, king of ANNWVYN." "ANNWVYN," thought Pwyll, "the Otherworld? What have I done?" All his life he had heard tales of the Otherworld, that land that lies over our own and under it too, and is blended with it. We might seek it all our lives and never find it, or, not knowing what dangers lie within it, we may wander blind in our ignorance and into an unknown wood, and, when a strange mist falls down upon us, find ourselves there in all its perilous beauty. Rowan, king of ANNWVYN, spoke on. "You have sworn by the gods to make amends. So you shall, and so earn my friendship. This is then the charge I lay upon you. You shall go to my court in ANNWVYN. There you shall rule in my place for 1 year. On the last day of that year you shall ride out to the ford which is the end of my realm. There you will meet the man who wages ceaseless war upon me, Huw Carr. He also claims the kinship of ANNWVYN. You shall fight him in my place. If you live, you will have my friendship."
"Lord," said Pwyll, "I will do this. But will your people not wonder where their lord has gone? And if I am to stand in your place, will they not reject me?" At this, Rowan raised his right hand, in which he held a staff of elder. He pointed it high above Pwyll's head, and then swept it down towards the ground. As Rowan did this, Pwyll felt an itching in his skin. He dropped the reins and brought his hands to his face, which felt flushed with heat. Rowan smiled a crafty smile, but it was no longer a Rowan. As Pwyll looked, he saw the man upon the dapple-grey horse now had his own image.
"Yes," Rowan said, "my people will obey you now when they look to you and see my face. None in my court will know you are not I. None, but perhaps one."
Pwyll sought to ask who this one may be, but Rowan spoke again.
"When the day comes to fight Huw Carr, you must be sure to strike him one blow only. If you succeed in knocking him from his horse, he will beg you to finish him with a killing blow. This you must not do, however much he pleads. The ways of the Otherworld are not your ways. Do as I bid, and if you survive, we will meet again in 1 year and a day. Go now. I will let you find your way to my court."
Without word, Pwyll's horse moved below him, and at once began to trot down a narrow track between the trees. Overhead the branches weaved together until they formed a roof of wood, and all Pwyll could hear was a muffled thud, thud, thud of his horse's hooves on the thick turf. A long time they rode on this path, until it grew dark within the wood. Pwyll had all his life hunted in the woods of Dyfed, and knew all the sounds of every bird and beast, but the calls that came out of the dark between the trees were strange and sinister to him, so he turned his head straight on and focused on the path ahead. In time, they emerged out onto a rising slope, as the sun sank low on the horizon behind him. Its walls were rendered in smooth white, so as it caught the light of the setting sun, the castle shone like a candle flame. About it, the night seemed a cloak of true purple, and the stars were as flawless diamonds upon a cushion of velvet. Pwyll rode to the open gate. Once inside, he was met by handsome lads dressed in rich silver grey. As Rowan had said they would, they greeted him as if they had always known him. They saw to his horse and to his needs, cleansing him of the dust of the road, and dressing him in garments of the finest gold brocade. Everywhere he looked he found the richest of furnishings and appointments. The floor beneath his velvet shoes was of painted polished tiles, smooth and cool, and the walls were hung with tapestries that were so intricate the scenes sewn upon them seemed almost to move. When the time came to feast, He was led by Aron's courtiers, whose conversation was as bright and noble as was their matchless garments and weapons, to the great hall, which was filled with marvellous light. On the long tables were cups and vessels of pure red gold. They sparkled in the light, more beautiful than any gold he had ever before beheld. Yet there was greater beauty to come. Red gold, too, was the hair of the lady who came to sit at his side. She was tall and slender, long of neck and unequalled in grace. When he looked upon her face, Pwyll knew he had never seen a more beautiful woman. His heart ached, yet when she spoke, he learned at once there was greater beauty than the eyes can hold. Her voice was an enchantment. All through that feast he listened to her words. Never had he known one more wise, more insightful, and more gracious than she. When the time of feasting came to an end, and those gathered desired more to carouse than to weave words, the lady at his side touched his hand and drew him to their bedchamber. More than anything in the world, he longed to lie with her and know her embrace. But he knew, too, that Aron had made this so. She was Aron's queen. He knew then that though death may well await him at the end of the year, there were greater trials to face here and now. So when they lay down in the bed as soft as owlet's down, he turned his back to her, the loveliest woman in the world, and did not touch her. Every night his longing for her grew, and every night she seemed more beautiful still. Every night he drew up his courage in bed and turned his back to her. So a long and painful year passed. Yet in all that time Pwyll found that there was nothing in the court of King Aron that was not the most splendid he had ever known. Each plate was adorned with jewels. Each member of his court was noble-faced, fair of speech, and unmatched in care and courtesy. Each hunt and feast and jest were greater than the last. It was with heavy heart that Pwyll rose on the last day, knowing it must all now come to an end. It was the queen who came and dressed him in Aron's armour. The metal was as bright as ice, and it shone. When she had finished, she raised her lovely face and said, "When you are victorious at the end of this day, let it be my husband who finds me waiting for him in our bed." Pwyll flushed at this. Had she known all along? Of all the court of Aron, she indeed seemed the one who would know him truly. "Though I have not been as a husband should be to you, I hope that tonight you will have everything that you have longed for again." As Pwyll set out from the court of Aron, there rode at his side a mighty company. Each was arrayed in the costliest of armour, and every plate shone like silver on a fair day under a blue sky. Banners of deep blue and scarlet and silver grey streamed out from spear tips, held high in the wind. They rode to the reaches of Aron's lands, until they came to a ford in a stream. There they were met by an opposing company, each dressed in armour that gleamed like matchless gold. Two came to meet Pwyll. One was the herald of Havgan. The other was Havgan himself. Whereas Aron and his people were all beautiful to look upon, so that they transcended the form of mortals, Havgan had a form of mightiness unlike any that Pwyll had ever before faced. His golden armor seemed as impenetrable as a castle wall. Pwyll remembered what Aron had said, that if he managed to unseat Havgan with one blow, he must not strike another, even if Havgan begged him to do so. But now that he saw him, he almost laughed to himself. Havgan seemed as sure in his saddle as if he and his horse were both carved out of one piece of rock.
"Nobles, listen well to me," cried the herald of Havgan. "This battle is between two, and two alone. Each has claim on the kingdom of ANNWVYN, and so they must settle this dispute alone. Let all others recognize their right to single combat, and aid them not."
Pwyll and Havgan took their place at an equal distance on either side of the stream. Pwyll looked at his mighty opponent. He felt like a twig set against an ancient oak, powerful, withstanding all the storms of the world, with drinking roots wound deep into the earth. How could he overcome such a thing? Still, it was his doom. He had sworn to absolve himself of the dishonor he had brought upon himself. One did not bite the thumb in the face of the lords of the Otherworld, and not expect to be deeply bitten back. He spurned his horse and began to race towards the river and face his foe. Havgan's steed charged towards him. Its eyes were alight with the wild fires of ANNWVYN. How would he knock Havgan from such a beast? His eyes darted back and forth over Havgan's form as he thundered closer. Was there a weak spot in his armor? No. Havgan held his shield stronger and more true than any mortal. And then he saw the lance of Havgan tilt and rise, pointing straight at Pwyll's eyes. Havgan did not mean to unhorse him. He meant to pierce through Pwyll's helm and kill him outright. He felt a sudden itching in his skin. The Otherworld King was almost upon him. All hope was lost. As he thought so, the itching became a hot burning, and then he felt his body seemed to shrink down within his armor. He was turning again into his own shape. At that very moment, the lance of Havgan struck. Yet it had meant to strike at the tall shape of Aron, and instead it glanced off the peak of the helm that now housed the shorter Pwyll. His own lance, poised to strike Havgan mid-shield, now slipped down and breached below, catching Havgan in his belly and unseating him fully from his charger. Over the retreating rear of his horse, he hurtled and fell with a crash to the ground. Pwyll slipped off of his saddle and came to Havgan's fallen side. "Quick," the mighty man said, his voice shaking. "Take your sword and kill me now. Strike me another blow and finish what you have begun." Remembering the words of Aron, Pwyll did not do what he was bidden. Seeing him hesitate, Havgan cried out to him a second time. "I am suffering. End my life. Take up your sword and finish me. I have made no claim against you. By what right do you now allow me to suffer so? Do me this one boon, and take my life swiftly." By these words, Pwyll knew that Havgan saw him truly as himself, and not her own. Yet he did not rise to draw out his sword. Havgan's next words were cried out in a desperate tone. "By all fears and all loves, by the bright skies overhead, by the lips of the lady you love best, set me free. End my life. These words pulled deeply at Pwyll's heart. He did not wish to see a king so needlessly suffer, but he was sworn to Arwen not to do this deed, and so sworn, his oath held him fast. At last, Havgan's face darkened, and he said in a bitter, defeated voice, "So be it." Then he called out to his followers, "My people, I am broken, and will not now rise again. The summer sun has finally set in me. My death is now certain. I can no longer maintain you. Let my people and the people of Arwen, the true king of ANNWVYN, be as one." Knights came then, and lifted Havgan from the bank of the river, and carried his body away. Those assembled like shadows melted away. Pwyll returned to his horse, turned his back on the road to Arwen's castle, and began to pick his way on the wooded path to Glyn Ceich. At last he came to the place where the stag and the white hounds had been, and found the man in grey, Arwen, awaiting him with arms held wide. He embraced Pwyll and said, "The gods have rewarded you and I, and made our friendship fast. You have united my kingdom under one rule, and when you return to your lands, you will find what I have done for you in turn." So when Pwyll came again to his halls at Arbeth, he went straight to his steward and asked him to gather all the chief courtiers and advisers of his court. "How would you say my rule has been in the last year? Speak to me truly now, for I want to know all my faults and how I have failed in my rule." The steward, courtiers, and advisers talked among themselves, and then answered him, saying, "Lord, none here can think of a single thing you have done that was not wise, just, and merciful. Never have you been more perceptive and fair in judgment, never more free with gift-giving. Never have you brought such prosperity to your people, or used such discernment. We, your people, have grown in the past year to know there is no greater ruler in all the island of the mighty. Between me and our gods, it was not I who made it so," said Pwyll, and he told them all what had befallen him after the hunting of the stag in Glyn Ceich. "But I will not fail you now," he said, when they had learned the truth. "And as Arwen has ruled, so shall I, forever on from this day." And it was so. When Arwen returned to his court in ANNWVYN, he went straight to his bedchamber to see his wife. When they went to bed, he lay and caressed her lovingly. When he spoke to her, she answered him not. A second time he caressed her and called her loving names, and she replied not. He rose in bed and asked of her a third time, "Why will you not speak with me, your husband?"
"Lord,"
said she,
"this our bed has known no speech for a year, neither the pleasure of your touch, nor even the sight of your face, as your back was ever turned to me, until in the morning you would arise."
"Between me and the gods," Arwen said half to himself, "what a faithful comrade is Pwyll." So it was from that time that the friendship between Arwen and Pwyll was increased. Each sent the other hounds and horses and whatever beautiful treasure he thought the other would value. And because of both Pwyll's valour in defeating Havgan and uniting ANNWVYN, and the ever-growing prosperity of both realms through the example of Arwen, Pwyll came to be known as Pwyll, head of ANNWVYN, ever after, even unto this day.
Here ends this part of the tale. When next we meet,
I will tell of the day that Pwyll sat upon the mystical mound of Gorsedd Arbeth, and how he beheld the coming of the goddess Rhiannon.